I never thought my snow removal business would land me in the middle of a war with the most vindictive homeowners association president in Vermont. But there I was at 4 in the morning, watching my plow truck's headlights illuminate another buried fire hydrant, while Barbara Cunningham screamed into my voicemail about community responsibility. My name is Isaac O, and I had been running O&J snow removal services in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years. The business started small, just me and my cousin Jerry with one used plow truck, but we had built it into something respectable. We had contracts with 3 different neighborhoods, a dozen commercial properties, and enough residential clients to keep us busy through every winter storm that hit the Green Mountain State. The money was good during the season, and I had learned to save enough to coast through the summers doing odd landscaping jobs. The Riverside Estates HOA had been one of my best contracts for the past 5 years. The neighborhood was upscale, situated along the eastern bank of the Winooski River with views of the Adirondacks in the distance. 42 homes, all valued above $500,000, with winding streets that required careful plowing. The previous HOA board had been reasonable, professional even. They paid on time, their expectations were clear, and we had a good working relationship. Then Barbara Cunningham got elected president. Barbara was exactly what you would picture when someone says, HOA Karen. She was 53 years old with that aggressive blonde bob haircut that seemed to be standard issue for women who enjoy making other people miserable. She wore those chunky statement necklaces and always had her phone in hand, ready to document any perceived violation of the community guidelines. Her husband, from what I gathered, spent most of his time on business trips to avoid her, and her 2 adult children had moved to opposite coasts the moment they turned 18. The first sign of trouble came in November, 2 weeks after she took office. I was reviewing the contract renewal when I noticed she had added 17 new clauses. 17. The contract went from 3 pages to 11. Most of it was reasonable enough if overly detailed, but Clause 14 caught my attention. Contractor shall ensure all fire hydrants within the community remain visible and accessible at all times, cleared to a radius of 3 feet on all sides, with snow removed to ground level. I called her office, which was really just her home number because she had converted one of her spare bedrooms into an HOA command center, according to the neighborhood gossip. Barbara, it's Isaac from O&J Snow Removal. I am looking at the new contract. Yes, Isaac. I have made some improvements to protect the community's interests. Her voice had that particular quality of someone who thinks they are always the smartest person in the room. This clause about the fire hydrants, that is going to add significant time to each plowing. There are 18 hydrants throughout the neighborhood. That is not included in our standard service. Well, it needs to be included now. Public safety is not negotiable. I kept my voice level. I understand that, but clearing each hydrant properly adds about 90 minutes to each job. During a heavy storm season, that is a lot of extra labor. I will need to adjust the pricing. Absolutely not. The contract price remains the same. This is basic community responsibility. Barbara, I run a business. I cannot provide free labor. If you want the extra service, there will be an additional charge. I am happy to work out a fair rate. I think you will find, Isaac, that the contract states you must comply with all reasonable safety requirements. Fire hydrant access is a safety requirement. It is not optional and it is not extra. That clause is new. It was not in any of our previous contracts. Well, I am the president now, and things are going to be done properly. You can either agree to the terms or we will find another contractor. I was silent for a moment, running the numbers in my head. Losing the Riverside contract would hurt, but I was not going to be bullied into free labor. Let me think about it and get back to you. You have until Friday. We need the contract signed before the season starts. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next 2 days calling other HOAs and commercial clients, trying to gauge if I could afford to lose Riverside. Jerry thought I should just walk away. She sounds like a nightmare, man. Is it worth the headache? But the truth was, I needed the contract. 2 of my commercial clients had closed down during the pandemic and never reopened. The Riverside contract was $32,000 for the season, guaranteed money whether we got 10 storms or 30. I had truck payments, insurance, employee wages, and a mortgage of my own. I signed the contract on Friday. The first storm hit in mid-December, a nor'easter that dumped 14 inches on Burlington over 2 days. I started my route at 1 in the morning, planning to hit Riverside Estates first since it was my most demanding client. The snow was heavy and wet, the kind that makes plowing a workout even with hydraulics doing most of the work. I finished the main streets by 4:30, then started on the cul-de-sacs and individual driveways that were part of the premium service most residents paid for. By 6:15, I had been working for 5 hours straight, and I was just finishing up when my phone rang. Barbara. Isaac, I am standing outside right now and I can see at least 6 fire hydrants that are completely buried. This is unacceptable. I looked at the clock. 6:17 in the morning. Barbara, I just finished plowing. I was about to start on the hydrants. The hydrants should be cleared as you go, not left until the end. That is not efficient. I clear the streets first, then go back for detail work. Well, your inefficiency is creating a safety hazard. I expect those hydrants cleared within the hour. Barbara, I have been working for 5 hours. I have 3 other properties that need plowing. I will get to the hydrants, but it is going to be later today. The contract states they must remain accessible at all times. During active snowfall, that is impossible. Snow is still coming down. Anything I clear now will be buried again in an hour. That sounds like a you problem, Isaac. 1 hour. She hung up. I sat in the truck, exhaustion making my eyes burn, and seriously considered just driving away and never coming back, but I needed the money. So I called Jerry, who was finishing up our other properties, and asked him to cover my remaining locations. Then, I spent the next 2 hours digging out 18 fire hydrants in the freezing pre-dawn darkness while snow continued to fall. By the time I finished, 3 of them were already halfway buried again. This became the pattern for every storm in December and January. Barbara would call before I even finished plowing, demanding the hydrants be cleared immediately. She started timing me, documenting exactly how long each hydrant remained buried, taking photos with timestamps, and sending me daily emails with detailed complaints. I tried reasoning with her. I tried explaining the logistics of snow removal. I tried suggesting a compromise where I would clear the hydrants within 4 hours of finishing the streets. She rejected everything. According to Barbara, the contract was clear, and I needed to fulfill my obligations. The other residents started to notice. Most of them were sympathetic. Mark Henderson from Maple Court would bring me coffee when he saw me working at 5 in the morning. Susan and David Wright invited me in to warm up during one particularly brutal storm. They apologized for Barbara, said she had been driving everyone crazy with new rules and regulations. She fined me $300 for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street, Susan told me, shaking her head. They were behind a fence, but she could see them if she walked up our driveway and looked at a specific angle. But sympathy did not help me when I was exhausted, frozen, and spending hours on unpaid labor. February brought a break in the weather, and I had time to catch my breath and take stock of the situation. I had plowed 17 storms so far. I was averaging 2 extra hours per storm just on hydrant clearing. That was 34 hours of free labor, which at my normal rate was over $2,000 in lost wages. I had bills piling up because I was spending so much time at Riverside that I had to turn down other work. I tried one more time to negotiate with Barbara. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew she would be home. "Barbara, I need to discuss the contract terms. The hydrant clearing is unsustainable. We have been over this, Isaac. The terms are clear. The terms are costing me money. I am working for free. That is not reasonable. Then perhaps you are not the right fit for this community. I have received several bids from other contractors who are willing to fulfill all the requirements without complaint. That stopped me. You are looking for my replacement. I am exploring options. This community deserves a contractor who takes their responsibilities seriously. I take my responsibilities seriously. I am out there at 3 in the morning in blizzards making sure your streets are safe. What I am asking for is fair compensation for extra work that was never part of our original agreement. Your original agreement was with a different board. I am the president now, and things are different. If you cannot adapt, then we will find someone who can. I will be making my decision at the end of February. I suggest you focus on fulfilling your contract obligations if you want to be renewed next season." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen and stared at the contract, reading Clause 14 over and over. She had me trapped. If I stopped clearing the hydrants, she would claim I breached the contract and use it as cause to terminate without paying the remainder of the season. If I kept providing free labor, I would go broke trying to meet her demands. That is when the idea started forming. It was not a good idea. It was not a legal idea. It was probably not even a smart idea. But I was tired, broke, and angry, and sometimes that combination makes you do things you otherwise would not consider. The next storm came on February 28th. Weather reports were calling for 10 to 12 inches starting around midnight. I had a full day to prepare, to think about what I was planning, to talk myself out of it. I did not talk myself out of it. I started plowing Riverside at 1:30 in the morning. The snow was coming down steady, that perfect powder that Vermonters love for skiing but plow drivers hate because it drifts and blows and never stays where you put it. I worked my usual route, clearing the main streets first, then the side streets, then the cul-de-sacs. But this time, when I got to the fire hydrants, I did something different. Instead of carefully plowing around them and then hand-clearing the snow, I angled my blade and pushed the snow directly over them. Not just a little snow, but a solid 3-foot wall of packed powder and ice. I made sure to really compress it, driving forward and back several times to pack it down solid. 18 hydrants. 18 perfect burial mounds. Then I cleared the driveways and did my usual detail work, making sure everything else was perfect. By 6 in the morning, Riverside Estates looked beautiful. The streets were clear, the driveways were clean, the sidewalks were scraped, and every single fire hydrant was buried under a mountain of snow so solid you would need a jackhammer to clear it. I was finishing up the last driveway when my phone rang. "Barbara." "Isaac, I am looking at Birch Street right now, and I cannot even see where the hydrants are supposed to be." "Yeah, this storm dropped a lot of snow. It will take some time to dig them out." "It looks like you plowed snow directly onto them." "The snow has to go somewhere, Barbara. With accumulation this heavy, some of it ends up covering the hydrants. That is not acceptable. You need to clear them immediately." "I will get to them. Like I said, it is going to take some time." "How much time?" I pretended to think about it. "Well, With how packed down the snow is, probably 4 to 5 hours to do all 18 properly. 4 to 5 hours. That is ridiculous. That is what happens when you have to dig out hydrants from under 3 feet of compacted snow. It is hard work. You should have been more careful when you were plowing. I was as careful as I could be while clearing 16 inches of snow from 3 miles of road. But if you would like to discuss adding a premium hydrant protection service to the contract, I am happy to provide a quote for next season. There was a long pause. Just get them cleared. I will do my best, but I have other properties that need attention. It might be this evening before I can get back to Riverside. That is a violation of the contract. The contract says they need to remain accessible at all times. It does not specify a timeline for clearing them after a major storm. I am doing my due diligence, Barbara. I will have them cleared within 24 hours. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end, clearly furious but unable to find a specific contract clause to cite. This conversation is not over, Isaac. I look forward to continuing it. Have a good day, Barbara. I hung up before she could respond. I spent the rest of the day working on my other properties, taking my time, making sure everything was done right. Around 5 in the evening, I headed back to Riverside with Jerry. We brought shovels, scrapers, and a snowblower, and we spent the next 6 hours methodically digging out every single fire hydrant. Barbara stood outside her house watching us for the first 2 hours, arms crossed, phone in hand, documenting everything. When it got too cold, she went inside but kept coming out every 30 minutes to check our progress. We finished at 11 at night. I was exhausted, sore, and absolutely satisfied. The next storm was 4 days later. I buried the hydrants again. Barbara called screaming this time. Actual screaming, not just angry talking. Something about negligence and endangering the community and breach of contract. I let her vent for about 2 minutes, then calmly explained that heavy snow accumulation sometimes results in hydrants being temporarily obscured, and I would clear them as soon as my schedule allowed. It took me 8 hours that time because I let the snow freeze solid before I came back to clear it. I did it again on the next storm, and the one after that. By mid-March, Barbara had sent me 43 emails, left dozens of voicemails, and had apparently contacted the city fire marshal to complain about my snow removal practices. The fire marshal, a guy named Tom Rodriguez who I had known for years, called me on a Saturday morning. Isaac, I got a complaint from Barbara Cunningham at Riverside Estates. She says you are deliberately burying fire hydrants. Tom, I am plowing streets in the middle of blizzards. Snow ends up where snow ends up. I clear the hydrants as soon as I can after each storm. She says it takes you 12 to 24 hours sometimes. I have multiple contracts and limited hours in a day. I prioritize making sure roads are passable first, then I handle detail work. The hydrants get cleared, they just do not get cleared instantly. I could hear him sighing. Look, man, I get it. I have dealt with her before. She called us 6 times last year about people having fire pits in their backyards. But technically, hydrants are supposed to be kept accessible. They are accessible, just not immediately after a major snowfall. Are you telling me every hydrant in Burlington gets cleared the second a storm ends? No, of course not. We have crews that work on it, but it takes days sometimes to get to all of them. So why is Barbara holding me to a different standard? Because she is Barbara Cunningham, and she has nothing better to do than make people's lives difficult. Just try to get to them a little faster if you can, okay? I do not want to have to write you up for something this stupid. I will do my best, Tom. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about how far I could push this before it became a real problem. The fire marshal had basically told me I was not doing anything technically wrong, but Barbara clearly was not going to let it go. The decision was made for me 2 days later, when I received a certified letter from Barbara, sent on behalf of the Riverside Estates HOA board. The letter stated that due to persistent and flagrant violations of contract obligations regarding fire hydrant accessibility, my contract was being terminated effective immediately, and I would not receive payment for the final 2 months of the season. That was $8,000 she was refusing to pay me for work I had already completed. I called my lawyer, a guy named Phil Brennan, who handled most of my business contracts. I had known Phil since high school, and he owed me a favor after I had plowed out his office for free all last winter when his regular guy bailed on him. "Phil, I need your help with a contract dispute." I explained the situation, sent him copies of the original contract and all of Barbara's emails, and waited while he reviewed everything. He called me back 2 hours later. "Okay, so the good news is she does not have grounds to terminate. The contract specifies that hydrants must be kept accessible, but it does not define a specific timeline. You have been clearing them, just not on her preferred schedule. She would need to prove you were deliberately negligent, and that is a high bar to clear." What is the bad news? The bad news is fighting this is going to cost you time and money. You will need to sue the HOA for breach of contract to get your $8,000. That means filing fees, court costs, and my hourly rate. Even if you win, which you probably will, it is going to take months and you might not recover all your legal expenses. So she gets away with stealing $8,000 from me? Not necessarily. I can send a demand letter citing the contract terms and threatening legal action. Sometimes that is enough to make people back down, especially when they realize they are legally in the wrong. But HOAs can be stubborn, and from what you are telling me, Barbara sounds particularly stubborn. Send the letter. I want her to know I am not just going to roll over. Phil sent the demand letter that afternoon. It was professional, detailed, and made it very clear that the HOA had no legal basis for withholding payment. It gave them 14 days to pay in full or face litigation. Barbara's response came in 3 days. It was a letter from a lawyer she had hired, some guy from a Burlington firm who specialized in HOA law. The letter stated that the HOA maintained its position that I had breached the contract through negligence and willful misconduct, and they would vigorously defend against any legal action. She was going to fight. Phil was right about the costs. Filing the lawsuit required a $500 court fee, and his retainer was $3,000. But I was past the point of thinking rationally about money. This was about principle now. Barbara had pushed me around for months, demanded free labor, and then refused to pay me for work I had done. I was not letting her win. The lawsuit was filed in Chittenden County Superior Court in late March. Vermont civil procedures meant it would be months before we even got a court date, probably not until late summer at the earliest. In the meantime, I had to keep my business running without the Riverside income. I picked up some additional residential clients and added a few more commercial properties, but it was not enough to fully make up the gap. I had to dip into my savings to cover the shortfall, watching the balance in my account slowly drop week after week. Then in April, something unexpected happened. The local newspaper, the Burlington Free Press, ran a story about disputes between contractors and HOAs. The reporter had somehow heard about my case and called me for an interview. I was hesitant at first, but Phil thought it might actually help. Public pressure can be effective, especially against HOAs. They hate bad publicity. So I agreed to the interview. The reporter, a woman named Jennifer Chen, was thorough. She reviewed the contract, looked at all the documentation, and even interviewed some of the Riverside residents. The story ran on the front page of the local section with the headline, "Snow Removal Contractor Sues HOA Over Fire Hydrant Dispute." The article was fair and balanced, presenting both sides of the issue, but it was pretty clear who came off looking reasonable and who came off looking petty. Jennifer even included quotes from Fire Marshal Tom Rodriguez explaining that hydrant clearing after major storms typically takes 24 to 48 hours throughout the city, which made Barbara's demands seem even more unreasonable. The response was immediate. My phone started ringing with calls from other contractors, sharing their own HOA horror stories. Several Riverside residents reached out to apologize and offer to testify on my behalf if needed. I even got a call from a state legislator who was considering introducing a bill to regulate HOA contract practices. But the most interesting call came from a guy named Robert Chen, who introduced himself as a Riverside homeowner and an attorney. "Isaac, I read the article in the paper, and I want you to know that not everyone in Riverside supports what Barbara is doing. In fact, a group of us have been documenting her behavior for months. We are planning to recall her as HOA president, and I think your case might be exactly what we need to make it happen. I appreciate the support, but I am not trying to start a civil war in your neighborhood. I just want to get paid for the work I did. I understand that, and you deserve to get paid. But Barbara has been abusing her position since the day she was elected. She has fined residents for ridiculous violations, blocked reasonable requests for home improvements, and driven away good contractors like yourself. You are not the first person she has done this to, just the first one willing to fight back publicly. What do you need from me? Would you be willing to attend a meeting with some of the other homeowners? We would like to hear your full story and see if there is enough grounds to support the recall petition." I agreed to meet with them the following week. The meeting was held at Robert's house, a beautiful colonial at the end of Riverside Drive with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. There were 12 homeowners there, including Mark Henderson, who had brought me coffee during those early morning plowing sessions, and Susan and David Wright, who had let me warm up in their house. I spent an hour walking them through everything that had happened, from the initial contract changes to Barbara's harassment to the final termination and payment dispute. I showed them emails, call logs, and all the documentation Phil and I had compiled for the lawsuit. Robert took notes throughout, asking clarifying questions about specific incidents and dates. When I finished, he looked around at the other homeowners. "Is there anyone here who still thinks Isaac is the problem in this situation?" Nobody spoke. "Barbara has a pattern of behavior," Robert continued. "She interprets the HOA rules in whatever way gives her the most power. She refuses to compromise or negotiate, and she retaliates against anyone who questions her authority. Isaac's case is just the most recent example. We have residents who have been fined thousands of dollars for minor violations, contractors who have been banned from the neighborhood for disagreeing with her, and board members who have resigned because she made their positions impossible." "How does a recall work?" Susan asked. "The HOA bylaws allow for a special election to remove a board member if 20% of homeowners sign a petition requesting it. That is 9 signatures out of our 42 homes. Once we have the signatures, we call a special meeting and the homeowners vote. A simple majority is all we need to remove her." "When do we start?" Mark asked. The recall petition was circulated within 3 days. Robert was strategic about it, approaching homeowners he knew were frustrated with Barbara first, building momentum before word got back to her. By the end of the week, they had 17 signatures, almost double what was required. Barbara found out when Robert formally submitted the petition to the HOA board and requested a special election. My phone rang at 7 in the morning the next day. "You think you are very clever, don't you, Isaac?" Barbara's voice was shaking with rage. "I am not sure what you are talking about, Barbara. Do not play dumb with me. You put those homeowners up to this recall petition." "Actually, I did not. They contacted me, not the other way around." "But I understand why they would want new leadership. You have not been particularly effective as president. I have been protecting this community from contractors like you who think they can cut corners and ignore safety regulations. I did not cut any corners. I fulfilled every obligation in that contract, and you know it. You just wanted free labor, and when I would not give it to you, you decided to punish me by withholding payment. I will see you in court, Isaac, and when I am done with you, you will never work in this city again." "Looking forward to it, Barbara. Have a nice day." The special election was scheduled for late May. Vermont law required 30 days' notice for HOA elections, which gave Barbara time to campaign and try to convince residents to vote against the recall. She went all out. She sent daily emails to every homeowner listing all the improvements she had made during her tenure. She created a full-color flyer outlining her vision for the community. She even hired a professional designer to make a website supporting her presidency. But she could not overcome the basic fact that most people did not like her. The vote was held on May 27th in the Riverside Estates clubhouse. 38 of the 42 homeowners showed up, which was apparently a record for HOA meeting attendance. Phil came with me as my attorney, and several reporters from local papers were there, including Jennifer Chen from the Free Press. Barbara arrived wearing a navy blue pantsuit and carrying a leather portfolio full of documents. She looked confident, almost defiant, as she took her seat at the front table. Robert stood up to moderate the meeting, reviewing the petition and the reasons for the recall vote. Then Barbara was given 15 minutes to address the homeowners and defend her presidency. She talked about fiscal responsibility, safety standards, and maintaining property values. She claimed that her strict enforcement of rules had made Riverside Estates one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Burlington. She never once mentioned me by name, but she made several references to contractors who fail to meet basic safety obligations. When she finished, Robert asked if anyone wanted to speak before the vote. Susan Wright stood up. "I have lived in Riverside for 12 years, and I have served on this board under 3 different presidents. I can honestly say that Barbara's tenure has been the most divisive and difficult period in our community's history. She does not lead, she dictates. She does not compromise, she threatens. And she has cost this community money and reputation by driving away good people who want to work with us." Mark Henderson spoke next. "Barbara fined me $600 last month because my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Not a different color, just the wrong shade. I had to have it professionally color matched and repainted. That is not leadership, that is tyranny." 4 other homeowners stood up and shared their own stories of fines, disputes, and conflicts with Barbara. By the time the public comment period ended, it was clear which way the vote was going. The ballots were distributed, collected, and counted by Robert and 2 other board members. The room was silent for the 10 minutes it took them to tally the results. Robert stood up with the final count. 38 ballots cast. In favor of recalling Barbara Cunningham as HOA president, 34. Against, 4. The recall passes. Barbara, effective immediately, you are removed from your position. The room erupted in applause. Barbara sat frozen for a moment, her face turning red. Then she grabbed her portfolio and stormed out without saying a word. The board appointed Robert as interim president and scheduled a special election for June to fill the position permanently. One of his first acts was to review all active contract disputes, which meant revisiting my case. I got a call from him the next day. "Isaac, the board met this morning and we have voted to settle your lawsuit. We will pay you the full $8,000 that was withheld, plus an additional $3,000 to cover your legal fees and expenses. I am truly sorry for what you went through, and I hope we can convince you to consider taking back the snow removal contract for next season." "I appreciate that, Robert. Let me think about the contract, but I definitely accept the settlement." "Fair enough. I will have our attorney draw up the settlement agreement and get it to Phil by the end of the week." The settlement came through exactly as promised. The check arrived on June 10th, and I deposited all $11,000 with a sense of relief I had not felt in months. I was not completely whole. I had still lost money on the deal when I factored in all the time and stress, but at least I had not been completely screwed over. I met with Robert in late June to discuss the snow removal contract for the following season. He offered me the same rate as before, but with the hydrant clause removed and replaced with something more reasonable. Contractor will make best efforts to clear fire hydrants within 48 hours following the end of active snowfall. "That I can work with," I told him. "I am glad. The homeowners spoke very highly of your work, and we would like to continue our relationship if you are willing." "I am willing, but I have one condition. If Barbara moves back into a leadership position at any point, I am out. No notice, no negotiation. I am just done." Robert laughed. "I do not think you need to worry about that. Barbara has actually put her house on the market. Apparently, she does not want to live somewhere that does not appreciate her leadership style." "Where is she moving to?" "I heard she bought a condo in a new development in South Burlington. One of those places with an even stricter HOA than ours used to be. Maybe she will be happier there." I signed the new contract and shook Robert's hand. The following winter was blissfully boring. I plowed the streets of Riverside Estates during 7 major storms and a dozen minor ones. I cleared the fire hydrants within 48 hours every single time. Nobody called me screaming at 4 in the morning. Nobody documented my work with timestamp photos. Nobody tried to cheat me out of thousands of dollars. It was perfect. In February, I got an unexpected call from Jennifer Chen at the Free Press. "Isaac, I am working on a follow-up story about your case. I heard that there has been some interesting legal developments involving Barbara Cunningham." "What kind of developments?" "She is being sued by 3 different contractors at her new condo development, and the HOA there is investigating her for financial misconduct. Apparently, she was elected treasurer and there are some questions about missing funds." "Seriously?" "Yeah. I was wondering if you would be willing to comment on it for my article." I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to pile on, to publicly say that I had warned everyone about what kind of person Barbara was. But another part of me was just tired of the whole situation and ready to move on. "I think I will pass, Jennifer. I got my settlement, I have my contract back, and I am done dealing with Barbara Cunningham. Whatever is happening with her now is somebody else's problem." "I understand. Thanks anyway, Isaac." The article ran a week later without my comments, but it was damning nonetheless. Jennifer had interviewed the contractors suing Barbara, gotten documentation of the financial irregularities at her new HOA, and even found residents at Riverside who were willing to go on the record about their experiences with her. The most interesting detail was that the missing HOA funds totaled nearly $40,000, and the Burlington Police Department had opened a criminal investigation into possible embezzlement. I read the article with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Had Barbara been stealing from the Riverside HOA while she was harassing me about fire hydrants? It seemed almost too perfect, like karma had decided to really commit to the bit. 2 months later, in April, Barbara was arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony embezzlement. Prosecutors alleged that she had systematically diverted HOA funds to personal accounts both at Riverside Estates and at her new condo development, using her position as treasurer to cover her tracks. The story made regional news, and my phone blew up with calls from reporters wanting me to comment. This time, I agreed to give a brief statement to Jennifer Chen, since she had broken the original story. I am not surprised that Barbara's behavior extended beyond just contractor disputes, I told her. When someone shows you they believe rules do not apply to them, and they are willing to abuse their power over small things, it is usually a sign of deeper problems. I hope the legal system holds her accountable. The preliminary hearing was in June, and I actually attended to watch the proceedings. Barbara showed up with an expensive defense attorney, but the evidence against her was substantial. The prosecution had bank records, emails, and testimony from forensic accountants showing a clear pattern of theft over 18 months. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors were not interested in going easy. Financial crimes against HOAs were a growing problem in Vermont, and they wanted to send a message. The trial was scheduled for September, and I had no intention of following it closely. I had my own business to run, and I was done letting Barbara Cunningham take up space in my head, but Phil called me in August with an unexpected request. The prosecution wants to know if you would be willing to testify as a character witness. Character witness? About the embezzlement? Not exactly. They want to establish a pattern of behavior showing Barbara's willingness to abuse her authority and act unethically. Your lawsuit and the contract dispute are part of that pattern. They think your testimony could help show the jury who Barbara really is. I was not enthusiastic about spending a day in court reliving the worst winter of my professional life, but I also believed Barbara needed to be held accountable for what she had done. Not just to me, but to everyone she had stolen from and abused. Okay, I will do it. The trial started on September 15th. I was scheduled to testify on the 3rd day. Phil came with me to the courthouse, and we sat in the hallway outside the courtroom for 2 hours before I was called. When I finally walked into the courtroom, I saw Barbara sitting at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. She did not look at me as I was sworn in. The prosecutor, an assistant district attorney named Michael Foster, walked me through the timeline of my contract with the Riverside HOA, focusing on Barbara's contract changes, her demands for free labor, and her eventual termination of the contract and withholding of payment. Mr. O, in your professional opinion, was Miss Cunningham's behavior consistent with standard business practices? No, it was not. In 8 years of running my business, I had never had a client demand free labor, refuse to negotiate reasonable terms, and then try to avoid payment by making false claims about contract violations. It was completely outside the norm. And how did her behavior affect you professionally and financially? I lost income because I had to provide free labor. I incurred legal fees to recover payments she wrongfully withheld. I had stress and exhaustion from trying to meet impossible demands. It was one of the worst professional experiences of my career. Barbara's attorney cross-examined me, trying to make it seem like I had been negligent and Barbara had just been protecting the community. But I had all my documentation, my timeline was clear, and the eventual settlement from the HOA undercut any claim that I had been in the wrong. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt a weight lift. I had said what needed to be said, and now it was up to the jury. The trial lasted 8 days total. The prosecution brought forward mountains of financial evidence, testimony from HOA members who had noticed irregularities, and expert witnesses who explained how Barbara had manipulated the accounting systems to hide her theft. Barbara's defense was weak. Her attorney tried to claim the money had been borrowed with the intention of paying it back, but he could not explain why she had never told anyone about these supposed loans, or why the money had been spent on personal expenses like vacations and luxury goods. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with their verdict, guilty on both counts of felony embezzlement. Sentencing was scheduled for October. I did not attend, but Phil sent me the details. Barbara was sentenced to 4 years in prison, ordered to pay full restitution of $42,000 to the 2 HOAs she had stolen from, and banned from serving on any HOA board in Vermont for life. 4 years seemed light to me for stealing $42,000, but Phil explained that white-collar crimes often get lighter sentences than they should, especially for first-time offenders. At least she was actually going to prison, which was more than what happened in a lot of these cases. Life moved on. I continued running my snow removal business. The contract with Riverside Estates renewed every year without issue. Robert served as HOA president for 2 years before stepping down, and his replacement was equally reasonable. The neighborhood became one of my favorite clients, proof that HOAs do not have to be nightmares when they are run by decent people. I expanded my business over the next couple of years, bought a second truck, and hired 2 more full-time employees. The incident with Barbara became a good war story to tell other contractors when we talked about dealing with difficult clients. A reminder that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it is expensive and exhausting. 3 years after Barbara's conviction, I got a letter from her. It was forwarded through Phil's office, and I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short and handwritten on plain white paper. Barbara apologized for how she had treated me, said that her time in prison had given her perspective on her behavior, and acknowledged that she had been wrong to demand free labor and withhold payment. She did not make excuses or try to justify what she had done. It was just a straightforward apology. I did not respond to the letter, but I did not throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from that winter, a strange epilogue to a strange chapter of my life. I sometimes wonder what made Barbara the way she was. What drives someone to be so petty and controlling over something as mundane as snow-covered fire hydrants? What makes a person think they can steal from their own community and get away with it? I never figured out the answers to those questions, and I eventually stopped trying. What I did learn was that some fights are worth having, even when they are expensive and stressful and seemingly hopeless. If I had just walked away from the Riverside contract, Barbara would have gotten away with stealing $8,000 from me, and she would have continued abusing her power until someone else finally stood up to her. By fighting back, I got my money. I kept my business afloat, and I helped trigger a series of events that ultimately held her accountable for much worse behavior. I also learned that fire hydrants are a huge pain in the ass to clear when they are buried under 3 feet of compacted snow, and I am glad I do not have to do it the hard way anymore. These days, when I drive through Riverside Estates during a snowstorm, I think about that winter and everything that happened. The streets are clean, the hydrants are clear within 48 hours, and nobody calls me screaming at 4 in the morning. I have a good relationship with the HOA board. My contract is fair, and I make a decent living doing work I am good at. It is exactly what I wanted from the beginning, before Barbara Cunningham decided that fire hydrants were the hill she wanted to die on. Sometimes the simplest things become the most complicated battles, and sometimes those battles need to be fought. I never buried another fire hydrant deliberately after that winter. I did not need to. The point had been made, the war had been won, and I had better things to do with my time than play petty games with people who thought they could push me around. The plow truck still runs, the business still grows, and every winter I am out there at 3 in the morning making sure the streets are safe when the snow falls on Burlington, Vermont. And somewhere, in a prison in Vermont, Barbara Cunningham had 4 years to think about fire hydrants and all the choices that led her to that cell. I hope she learned something from it. I know I did.